Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I am Melissa Inanj, Public Relations Specialist at Florida Municipal Power Agency and Vice President of Media Relations at FPRA Orlando. My co-chair, Jose Luis Diego, who also helped put this event together, is also on the line. Hi, Jose. We wish we could all be in person with you guys at our annual Media Mashup event, but it's wonderful to be here and connect with you virtually and have some of Central Florida's best journalists join us on this call today. Also, on behalf of FPRA Orlando, I would like to first welcome Orlando chapter of PRSA, who's partnering with us today for this virtual panel and the rest of our Media Mashup events this month. We understand the past couple months have been really difficult for many of us, and we're all trying to get slowly used to this new normal, as we call it. We've been working to bring you, our members, resources and support, and we'd like to thank everyone who's made donations to support our programs and emergency assistance fund for those who have been impacted by COVID-19. If you'd like to donate, you can visit fpraorlando.org/donate, or you can confidentially apply for assistance by contacting our chapter president, Megan Paquin. Also, like many of you, we've been deeply saddened by the recent events in our country, and we just want to let you know that we are committed to taking actions to continue promoting diversity and inclusion. We've recently shared resources, places to donate, and plan on having coffee chats with our members to have a good conversation on the topic of racism as well. And in partnership with PRSA Orlando, we're happy to let you know the proceeds raised through this event and other Media Mashup events is going to New Image Youth Center, a youth organization that helps students K through 12 in the Paramore community. So thank you all so much for donating and helping us donate funds toward a good cause. We'll continue our efforts to promote diversity and, of course, always welcome ideas from our members around this as well. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rich Donnelly, who is the president of PRSA Orlando, to say a few words before we kick off our program.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Good morning. On behalf of the PRSA Orlando chapter and our program co-chairs, Heather Wilson and Kimberly Devitt, I want to thank our panelists and all the participants for today's program. It's great to see all of you today, or at least see you in chat. Appreciate you joining. We certainly hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. And as Melissa said, and from our chapter standpoint as communicators, we're certainly hoping you're using that power of communications, not only to use your voices, but also to listen, to understand, to take action. We have to embrace our differences, champion diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality. PRSA Orlando does have a diversity inclusion committee. It's an award-winning chapter committee that we do have, and we're likewise reaching out to our members to not only talk about everything that's going on, but also to really take action. And this is not a one-time situation, so we reach out and encourage our members to be active participants in that and share your voices and to take action. One quick mark your calendar. We certainly have another Media Mashup coming up on June 18th, which Melissa will share details on. But just wanted to let you know, July 16th at tentatively 8:30 a.m., we have a virtual program with the Orlando Economic Partnership. That's going to be Laureen Martinez, APR, and she's going to discuss the BRACE initiative, which is the Business Recovery Assistance Collaborative Engagement Program. And she's going to talk about some of the changes that the partnership has done during COVID-19, doing webinars, podcasts, videos. So for that, you can check out prsaorlando.org and follow our social media channels for registration information. So enjoy today's program, and back to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Rich. Before I introduce our lovely panelists, I wanted to share a couple housekeeping items. I see that we have a couple attendees still joining. As you guys may seen on our social media platforms, this is meant to be an interactive webinar, so we hope you came prepared with some great questions for our panelists. If you haven't shared your questions with us ahead of time, that's totally okay. You can drop them using the chat function in the bottom of the view for Zoom. There's a little chat icon that you can use. And there's also a raise hand option if you would like to raise your hand, and we can unmute you to ask your own questions directly. And currently, all the participant video and microphones are muted to avoid background noise. Again, as you ask questions, we'll unmute just so we can have dialogues, or you can use the chat function. And if we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can today, we have close to 100 attendees. So thank you all so much for being here. And if we don't get to answer all your questions, we're sharing lots of great tips on our social media throughout the month with journalists throughout Central Florida, and you can stay tuned to those as well. And this webinar is being recorded. If you miss anything, we'll make it available to you on our website later. So now it's time for the best part. Just to introduce a little of what we're going to discuss today. As you guys all know, COVID-19 has brought many challenges and certainly impacted the Central Florida media landscape. Pitching stories has become difficult, and of course, working with our media partners is more important today than ever before. So we have Julie Anderson joining us today, who's the editor-in-chief at Orlando Sentinel and South Florida Sentinel. Roberto Viscon, who's a news director at Telemundo, and Kirsten Wolf, who's a news director at West News. Thank you guys so much for being here today. So we can go ahead and kick it off. I would like to turn the mic over to you. Maybe we can get started with you, Julie. We'll go through Roberto and Kirsten. Can you guys briefly tell us about yourselves and maybe get started by briefly telling us how this pandemic has changed the media landscape?
Sure. So I'm Julie Anderson. I actually grew up here in Orlando. The Orlando Sentinel is my hometown newspaper, and but I also run the South Florida Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale. So I would say that I'd say that the biggest way that the pandemic has changed the way that we operate is that we started going remotely in both newsrooms in mid-March, and I was a skeptic, I think, that we could pull it off in a way that we have. I think because, newsrooms are very collaborative spaces. You learn a lot by, sort of walking by desks and talking to editors and reporters and getting ideas off of each other. So the fact that, we all had to scatter to our homes and stay put and couldn't even, for the most part, in the beginning at least, couldn't even get out into the community. It made it very, very challenging, but we immediately started using platforms like Zoom. We happen to use Microsoft Teams, and really have just seemed to have worked it out much, much better than I ever could have imagined. This story in particular is both, a global story and a local story. So it has required us to really, more than usual, I think, pay attention to national and international news to make sure that we're following along and sort of converting that to local stories, but finding our own stories too. And from the very beginning, I think that we wanted to make sure that we were being different and making sure that we were digging into how it uniquely impacted Central Florida.
Thank you so much, Julie. Roberta, any thoughts from you? If you can briefly introduce yourself as well.
Yes, hi, I'm Roberto Viscon, and I'm now the news director for the Telemundo affiliate here in Orlando. And I'm Cuban-American, so most of my career I spent in South Florida, although I've been everywhere. That's kind of the rite of passage of a news director. It's kind of a nomadic career. You have to be in many markets. Always end up in South Florida, and this is my second run in Orlando, and I share, Julie, and I'm sure Kristen will be sharing the same thought, that when we first started with this whole working from home, I was totally against it too, and especially because, again, newsrooms, you go around, it's so important to communicate. I mean, we're in the communication business, so and always, one of our biggest problems or challenges is that we don't communicate enough within ourselves. So that happens in a regular newsroom. And now if you send everybody out, so especially for managers, it's been very hard. But I agree with Julie, it's worked out. I mean, I never thought it would. I mean, I kind of put my foot down when they wanted to send my assignment desk home. And I told my HR, I will not work with an assignment desk from home. I just refused to do that. And I kept.
Uh-oh.
Oh, we lost.
Back.
Welcome back. I think your mic is muted, Roberto.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I didn't touch a thing. I don't know what happened.
Welcome back.
But yeah. But anyway, so at least I was able to keep the assignment desk in the station. There's only 2 of us, but the producers are home. The reporters, the photographers are home. The control room I cannot keep home because that has not been invented yet, although I'm sure someone will. And our emphasis has been, again, you know, the whole thing with the COVID and you know, at the very, very beginning, it was all about getting infected, but now people, especially in my, you know, we're kind of like a niche medium that we broadcast in Spanish. So of course, for our audience, the whole thing with the unemployment and the food banks has been huge. That's been like, we get tons of calls on the food banks and the IRS stimulus check and the disaster with the Florida unemployment insurance and the $600 from the COVID fund. So, but we've been able to do that. And like I said, it's been a challenge, but I'm surprised, you know, how we were able to do it. If someone had told me, I was saying that earlier, that we were going to be doing, especially from home, the weather segment and the sports segment, I would have said, you're crazy, you know, but we're doing it and people, the viewers accept it. It's been a very nice, an interesting way to kind of like Kristen said earlier, throw the old rule book away and kind of experiment with things.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Kristen, any thoughts from you before we kick off some Q&A?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I've been in Orlando for about 12 years, been the news director here at West 2 for 5 years as the assistant news director prior to that. And I'm a West Coast girl stuck in an East Coast Southern state. So I'm learning. I'm gonna look at this from a little bit from a different perspective. Certainly from the people perspective, you know, I agree with everybody else on how that's impacted us. But I think from a technology standpoint, it's been super interesting too, especially for a broadcast station, that, you know, we used to think that everything had to be set up perfectly. The video had to be perfect and the audio had to be pristine and it had to be presented in this AP style book sort of, you know, classic way. This has been revolutionary on the technology. I can't talk today. Sorry, the technology side of it, because we are going to see ourselves do things differently after all of this is over. You're going to see fewer of those $150,000 live trucks running around. You're going to see even fewer satellite trucks running around. You're going to see backpacks, which are already, you know, in vogue, but proving to be invaluable in this kind of situation. You're going to see our world and our news gathering ability expand exponentially by just being able to call somebody and do an interview with somebody who otherwise would have been out of our reach just via Zoom or Skype or some other way. So in a way, it's been a hardship. In a way, it's been a revolution that I think certainly broadcast news has needed for quite some time. And it's not just changing the way we do things, but the stories we tell. So it's weird, but it's also welcome.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, you know, in many different ways, we all had to find our own way of adapting to what's going on from a technology, writing stories, communicating with the communication professionals just to see how the stories fit. I think it's just been an adjustment for all of us for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this time, we're going to open the floor for questions. We've received a couple of questions in advance from some of you, so I'll go ahead and kick off the discussion for our lovely panelists with some of the questions we already have. And as we're doing this, feel free to use the chat function again down bottom, and we'll monitor the questions and ask them in the order that they were received. All right, so one of the questions we've received is, what role do you guys think social media plays when it comes to media relations? And Julie, if you'd like to take a stab at it, and we can have a conversation around it.
In terms of media relations? So,
yes.
I would say that, you know, everybody in our newsroom is very active in social. It's a way that we, it serves two purposes for us. One is we can find stories through social, and the other is that we can, you know, basically let everybody else know what it is that we're working on or what we've actually published. So I think it is an interesting way to reach individual journalists. And I think it's maybe even better to try and follow individual journalists than just the main accounts, because the people that manage the main accounts change on a regular basis. And I think it might be helpful from a PR perspective if you're following journalists that maybe are covering topics that are of interest to your clients, and get to know them through their social, through their Twitter or Facebook, and get to understand like what it is that they're interested in. And I think that would be I think that should be a benefit to PR professionals. And it's, you know, we're just on it all the time. So it's a way to maybe indirectly pitch us as well.
Thank you. And we just had a follow-up question. I think this is in regards to the social media question. How important do you guys think LinkedIn has been to your job? Do you spend time on LinkedIn that yields or supports a story you or your team that you guys are working on? Or do you ever get pitches on LinkedIn? Kristen, maybe you wanted to share some thoughts on this?
I'm probably a really bad LinkedIn person.
Join the club.
And I don't use it properly, but I got to tell you, if one more person I don't have any idea of who they are tries to, you know, link me into their network, I think it can be valuable if you really keep it up and you know who the people are that you're, you know, communicating with. But you know, having somebody vouch for me who doesn't know me, or, you know, congratulate me on 3 years of experience. I know I need to delve into LinkedIn more, but that isn't something certainly in our newsroom that we rely on. We're much more social media in terms of Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram than we would be on LinkedIn. So somebody else probably would be better to take that.
No, I'm the same way. I don't spend that much time on LinkedIn. I think I should. It's just that everything else kind of takes time. But it's like everything else nowadays. You have to be open to getting messages from all over the place, through text, through Instagram, through Facebook, through Messenger, through email. It's the amount of messages coming at you are really, you know, a lot of them. But I usually don't, you know, unless there's something trending. I mean, I do get the little notices and I kind of look at it, but I don't think it's a good way to pitch, especially if the person doesn't know you. You know, you got to know the person somehow. You know, I always look at the people who are asking me to become friends, and then I don't know who they are. And you know, I mean, I just don't accept everyone because I don't know who they are. You know, it's the same as Facebook. You know, sometimes you get a lot of requests and you don't know who they are either. But so the personal email is the best thing.
I think there's a certain amount of homework that needs to go into PR. My husband's in PR, so I live a double life here, kind of seeing inside of what you guys do, but also seeing what I do. It speaks to being prepared. It speaks to all of you guys knowing what your audience is, who you're targeting, and where they communicate. If you hit me on LinkedIn, if you did a little bit of research, you'd tell that I'm not on there, even though I'm on there. If you would be on Facebook, you would see that, oh, she's really active there. You've got to find us where we live, and that may not be fair, but we have so many people trying to get to us that you're going to have to figure out on what platforms we are active and where we're more likely to communicate.
And I think that's so true. You know, if you go to someone's LinkedIn profile, you can look at their recent engagements to see if that person hasn't been engaging with anything for the past 1-2 years, and they tweet every day about what's happening in our community. That probably gives a little bit of a message on where they're active versus where they're not too. You just got to pay attention to those details probably. Yeah.
And, you know, everybody that has LinkedIn, our business email addresses are there. So you can use that to contact us. And I'm very, very good at email. I read every single email I get. Even when I'm on vacation, it's kind of like you have to clean up your box.
The
So,
sickness, don't do it.
well, it's just that if I get back from vacation, then I have 500 emails. I'd rather not. I don't mind, you know. And so it's easier to get me through email because even phone calls nowadays, you know, it's tough sometimes to get them. But definitely through email or even a text. You know, sometimes if you have my number or my cell number, I mean, sometimes people that I know send me a text and I react to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some great questions, guys. We have a question on, do you think that communications and pitches have changed even more for Orlando, given its incredible diversity and need for outreach in multiple languages?
Well, and someone had a question there or about, and also kind of looping back to what Kristen said about the technology, especially in my medium, which is kind of a niche medium, which is Spanish. If you want to pitch a story, and like she said, now we're doing all these Skype and Cisco WebEx and, you know, all these kind of interviews online. If you have someone that speaks Spanish on any topic, that's a plus for us. Mm-hmm. Since, you know, Kristen said the mechanics, the technological nuance is kind of like not as.
I think we lost Roberta for a second.
It's a technological nuance.
Yes,
right there.
perfect topic.
Right.
Kirsten, if you wanted to continue. Oh,
Yeah.
We have you back. We lost you for a second. Kirsten, if you wanted to add on that, on the topic of technology too, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, going to the, you know, different communities, different languages and that kind of thing, I think that we're seeing certainly it's easier for all of us to work more as a village, right, in terms of communicating our different agendas, our different needs, our different communities. When it comes to the language situation, you know, we're English language, but we do have we broadcast Estrella TV from here, so we are taking more steps and hiring more Spanish speakers, really, to make sure that we're populating the news part of Estrella, and that we are going to be, you know, doing more things in Spanish when hurricanes come around, and serving the growing populations, especially Osceola County. You know, that's a county that's just exploding, especially after Hurricane Maria, and people are coming and staying, and they need news in a way that they can consume it. So that need has never been greater, and it's hard for an primarily English speaking broadcast outlet to branch out like that, because it's not just the language, it's the stories and the communities and what the community needs. So that's a heavy lift, but one that I think everybody is starting. Even WFTV, you know, our nemesis across the street, they do a fantastic job in Osceola County with providing news and information that people there want and need in Spanish speakers.
And the Orlando Sentinel also has El Sentinel, which is our Spanish language news site and newspaper that, you know, they are, of course, are very comfortable in receiving pitches in Spanish. We also have hired, probably in the last few years, quite a few Hispanic journalists who are bilingual. So I think we're increasingly better at receiving, especially in Spanish. I can't say other languages, but Spanish in particular.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the question, I guess, was tying back to you, Kirsten, from the technology side. The question was, have you gotten any feedback from viewers that surprised you regarding technical limitations of using tools like Zoom and Skype for broadcast, like audio delays, resolution, etc.?
No, we anticipated that. You know, it used to be like a 3 to 4 second delay, like a latency in a backpack or something. We couldn't possibly put that on the air. But again, I think a couple of things are happening. One, we are broadcasting in a way that people are more used to consuming in their personal lives, which is not perfect. But that's just, you know, we talk about authenticity. That's another level of authenticity that people are going to accept because that's just how they know it when they do it. So I don't think that's a problem at all. And again, I think that opens the door to saying, if in the past, if it was a choice between you're going to have a 10-second delay and sit down and count to 10 slowly, you'll realize just how long that is, even 5 seconds. They want the information so much that the delay is not an imposition. It's not a problem. And again, it reflects what they're doing in their everyday life. So if anything, it's not a limitation. It is opened the doors for us to do more. And I think we're going to see it long after this ends.
No, I think one of the benefits of what has just happened recently with everybody having to stay home and get on these platforms is that we've had a lot better access to newsmakers who are CEOs who are willing to get on and have interviews with us. It might be with the editorial board. We'll sit down with the CEO of Advent Health or Orlando Health or whatever, and they'll just sit down and have an hour-long conversation with us, which, scheduling that in the past was much, much more difficult. And I don't know if it's just because they're at home or that they've learned this, they're more comfortable with this technology or whatever, but it has been a major help in terms of getting access.
Yeah. Go ahead, Roberto. I think you're
television as well. We would, on an interview like that, an hour interview, we would have to have a 2-camera shoot, the lighting and the 2 mics. And now we just click on the video screen and we do the interview. It's made news gathering a lot easier and a lot faster. And frankly, it's made our product a lot better. It has a lot more meaning.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important is for people to look at it as an opportunity right now versus a disadvantage at this point to say, offering an interview to someone is much more easier when we have these tools now than before. So it's a good time to respectfully take advantage of a technology like that. And, maybe, like you said, Kirsten, have those conversations on a more authentic level versus very structured and you wait days to schedule something. So it's, there are some advantages of this difficult situation that we're in.
Yeah, just to give you a quick example, we have an entertainment reporter and she said, hey, I'm going to see if we can do, since all the stars are home now, I'm going to see if I can interview Jennifer Lopez. And we never, ever think of that before. And I said, really? Yeah, I'm going to send her manager an email. Sure enough, about a week later, yeah, I'm available. So we were able to interview her through Skype, which we would never, ever be able to interview someone of that stature. But they're also bored. They're also home. So they want to talk to people. So it's been really interesting how much more accessible even the inaccessible have become because of the technology.
That is so true. And we have a follow-up question on the topic of technology and Zoom. This is to Kirsten and Roberto. Julie, I'm happy for you to chime in on this as well. The question is, what do you guys think of Zoom backgrounds? Some people use a photo of their building of their organization. Is that okay, or would you rather them just use their home or study and keep it more casual, I guess? Do you have a preference on that?
I think it needs to make sure that it's just appropriate. I'll tell on myself. We had a big company Zoom thing early on, and every morning in our meetings, small meetings locally, we have like a theme of the day, and you change your background. So I had chosen, don't judge me, The Last Supper, but some of the members of The Last Supper were the dogs from the poker playing painting. And so I had forgotten that it was there. It was fantastic, by the way. I had forgotten that it was there, but unfortunately in this big call, the president of our company was in this call. And so he said, so, hey, what do you got behind it? So I had to fess up. But I mean, that's an extreme, right? You have to be aware, but also just from our perspective is making sure that the person that you're interviewing live from home, if they have a bookshelf behind them, what are the titles of their books? Do they show a bias? Is there a profane word on it? It just, the simpler the better, because you have less room for error or someone misconstruing your message.
That's the PR world right there.
Yeah, right.
We have a question on, your teams are already covering so much right now. How are you guys preparing for hurricane season coverage? I know there has been a lot of stories on this topic, so I'm sure you're very familiar with it.
Well, one interesting tidbit is the issue with the shelters, that they cannot have schools or gyms or any of that. So they're thinking about having hotels. So that's going to be a little bit more challenging. We're kind of putting together a whole hurricane coverage. And that's going to be a little bit more challenging, where before you could just go to one place. Now we're going to have to go to several places. But I think everything else is going to be the same. It's just going to be the you know, how is it going to be in the social distancing arena? That's going to be kind of a challenging and interesting. We still haven't put together the whole plan yet, but I know that's going to be a challenge for us.
Yeah, one thing we're considering is, you know, usually when there's a hurricane and it is threatening, you know, Orlando, we bunker the newsroom in the building so that we're ensured that we have generator power and all that. And we're working around the clock anyway. So this will be different since we have not been in the building for, I think, 3 months now. That we'll just have to figure out, you know, how to socially distance and still do the job, you know, in the newsroom. But we're still planning to do that. Otherwise, I agree, everything else is the same.
Yeah.
I think we have a question similar to what we received earlier on. Are you as receptive to English pitches if we're offering a Spanish-speaking spokesperson? Again, going back to the topic of language, and do you guys have any?
Yes, of course. I mean, we all speak English at the station. Everyone does. It's just we broadcast in Spanish. So, and we do translate, like, you know, when Ron DeSantis has spoken and when, the president used to speak all the time, and we do have translators, but that's our main gig, is broadcasting in Spanish. But yeah, you can do it in any language you want. There's Google Translator nowadays. It's just that at the time of going on the air, we have to have someone that is relatively versed in Spanish to be able, to make it sensible to our audience. And an interesting point, when Orange County first started its news conferences, since Pino, the head health guy, is Cuban, and so is the other lady that works for him, or vice versa, we started shouting questions in Spanish. And I know a few times Demings and Dyer, they got kind of mad at us, but we need to ask in Spanish. And then eventually, as a consequence of that, and you see, I never had that problem in South Florida, because in South Florida, if you don't speak Spanish, you're dead. It's like, you got to speak Spanish. But up here is different. So, at first they kind of resented it, but eventually I guess they realized that not only Spanish, there's a sizable Creole audience here, a Haitian audience. So now they're doing it in the 3 languages. And then now we respect it, because
we lost Roberto for a second. We'll give him a few seconds to come back. I guess question on Zoom, it's still accurate. We still have issues.
I think the important thing is the information, getting the information to the people who need it, however you need to do that. If it's a beauty shop pitch, probably not going to do it in Spanish. If it's something that's life or death or update on COVID or that kind of thing, then absolutely.
Yeah. We'll move on to our next questions. This is a really good question, valid to our discussion topic today. Do you guys feel like readers or viewers are growing wary of COVID stories? If not, when do you think you'll be ready to move on and cover other stories? Or more importantly, when should we start pitching other stories?
Well, our traffic on COVID stories is definitely down from the level of the first month, which was unprecedented, I think. But it's still very strong, and especially on the daily updates when the numbers come out from the state. When those come out, they're I think our number 1 story at that time. So I think people are keeping track. In particular, they're keeping track of whether or not there's going to be another upswing. Mm-hmm. I think once the protest started, all the attention shifted to that. But people are still keeping an eye on COVID for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, everybody's looking for a date. When are we going to get back to normal? When are we coming back in the building? When are we going to tell different stories? There is no date. Who knows? But I think what you need to look at is, rather than saying, when will you be ready for the pitch that I want to make? You need to think, how does my pitch fit into the news cycle right now? Is it a pitch worth making? I'll use an example. Yesterday, I got an email pitch from Pep Boys. And this is the time of year where they announced their 4 standout technicians, right, nationwide. And so they sent this presser that said, we do this, here are the 4 people, they give outstanding service, blah, blah, blah. I thought, wow, what a wasted opportunity. Because that's a pitch that you could fit into the summer travel season when people are mostly going to travel by car and your car needs to be safe. And guess what? In these 4 areas, one was Orlando, we've got great people who not only sell you carburetors or air filters, but they also can work on your car. So rather than doing your ready-made pitch, look at the climate, look at the story cycle and the news cycle and find out, does your pitch work? If it does, you're going to maybe shoehorn it in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a question on how important is video to you in an email pitch, and to what degree do you think companies need to edit their video, B-roll, etc.?
I do not want your video.
Simple answer.
Thank you. I don't want your video.
Yeah.
I want you to give me access to the wonderful life-saving story of your product, but I don't want you to supply it because I am not the purveyor of your goods. I'm objective. I need to go and find out if the story that you're pitching me is a story. So thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. Yeah, we don't take corporate videos.
Okay.
It's just not part of journalism. So if we cannot shoot it ourselves, then we'll try to come up somehow. But I think nowadays, with talking to someone, is so much better than anything you have to show. You know, talking to the person. This is something very unique. Talking to the person and the person be well versed. I think that, you know, we just don't need the video.
Yeah, I would put the time that you might put into making a video into understanding each outlet's coverage tendencies, what it is that they're interested in. And I would pitch individual reporters. Don't pitch me. I get a pitch an hour. I can't look at them all, and I don't. I always, if something does catch my eye, I'll send it on to a reporter, but I say, you have to pitch that reporter. They usually have, a pipeline of stories that they're working on, and, they'll determine whether it rises to that level. I'll rely on them to vet whether it's a story or not.
I'm sure everyone who's listening to it will benefit from this. I think you guys gave a very authentic and real answer that everyone needs, so they can focus their time onto something that will benefit you and will serve a purpose and help you out as you go through hundreds of emails during the day.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. I run kind of a smaller operation, so I do have a lot more say-so in the day-to-day, and also I like it. But, especially stations like Kristen, they're like really big with a lot of people there. I mean, if you're going to be pitching Kristen, she has a million meetings a day with budget, corporate meetings. We're having issues ourselves with the social distancing, trying to make our places safe for some employees to come back. There's so much going on that you reach the assignment desk. If you can make a contact with the assignment desk, that is better, because that way that person is kind of day to day. Kristen might not be able to read it, or definitely Julie, she might not be able to read it ever. And then your story goes by the wayside. So if you can go to the middle management, it's a lot easier. And some people do pick it up, and then they'll break it up to the editorial meetings. And then someone like Julie or someone like Kristen would say, hey, I like that. Okay, let's do that,
I'm going to jump on and pile on here just because I know about your lists, right? I know that everybody's got lists. You need to put time in your list and make sure that people on your list are the right people. If you ever send a story pitch to me, you're wasting your time. I don't have time. It's not my job. So again, stalk your prey through social media. Find out who does what. Add them to your list. If you've got a department head or a leader of a newsroom or a newspaper or something, nobody's gonna see it. Guys, you've got to send it to the right person. You got to pick up the phone. You got to call the desk. You got to say, oh, hey, Aaron, I'm so-and-so. It's all about relationships. Even as, as shallow as calling somebody and saying, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I do. They're a lot less likely to toss it if they go, oh yeah, that person took the time to call me on the phone. I know what they're about. It's harder. but it's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah, like you said, it's all about relationships. Just pick up the phone if you have to. Yeah. Question is, what should PR professionals have done differently, if that's your perspective on it, to serve your reporting needs and audiences in a COVID world? Are there any things? Is there anything that you've seen?
I'll go back to reading the room, right? Again, I've been sort of saving some releases I've gotten over the past couple of days, and one I got yesterday was Beauty Together Now. Okay, first, don't send it to me. Second of all, it's like a beauty thing. This is not the time for a beauty thing, right? That your client is probably saying, hey, I need some press, I need something on this. But you've got to either find a way to temper their pitch to fit what's going on right now, or you have to be able to tell them, look, I'll go to trade publications, I'll do that, but local news right now is not the place for that kind of thing. And that's a hard line to walk, because you got to serve them, but again, you're spinning your wheels on stuff that just aren't going to play. And if I see that kind of thing in this kind of climate from somebody and I actually make note of the name, it's going to stick with me a little bit, that I'm like, okay, I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to do business with that person, sort of. It's hard again, but now's not the time.
Again, tying back to that, what about feel good COVID-19 stories during this time? And what are the key elements that make for viable, uplifting COVID-19 story in your newsroom? That's a great question.
I mean, so I'd be interested in stories about how people beat it, especially, elderly people, because all you hear about is, elderly people dying of COVID. So something like that would be of interest to me, being able to tell that story. We do look for feel-good stories. It seems like sometimes we don't, because sometimes the news seems to be so negative and dire. But we do look for them. But if I were to be honest, I'd say the balance is probably 80-20. Not that we ever plan that, but it's just the way that news tends to be more serious and negative, and so it really has to be, I guess, fit the moment and a little bit different. Yeah,
I agree.
Switching gears from the story side and the staffing levels and what's going on in your guys' world, the question is, are staffing levels down since pandemic started? If so, how has it impacted your teams and their ability?
well, our staff,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Julie. In our case, we're at full capacity. On the contrary, I wish I could have more people. Go ahead, Julie. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, our staffing levels are about the same. We've had to furlough some of our reporters just because of the drastic decrease in advertising. So our whole company, not just the Orlando Sentinel, but the whole company is operating on 3 months of furloughs. So that's been really challenging, but we've managed to work through it, and we still are, but it's came at a bad time.
I'll tell you that we've hired and moved 4 people during a pandemic. These aren't added positions; they're people who've left. So we're at full staff. And I will tell you that in addition to having the people that we have, we've added at least an hour of news every day by adding a 9 a.m. newscast. We've done more specials. So I think it's less about how many people are working and more about how much news every organization is able to turn out. And I think across the board, you're going to see stations and newspapers and publications doing more than they ever have before.
Yeah, definitely. Our digital traffic has never been higher. I mean, it's because the demand for news is there, and everybody's working so many hours, just to compensate for that. So I don't think you can tell it in the product, but it's we're definitely working.
Everybody's busy. Julie, we have a follow-up question. I know you briefly touched on the furloughs. The question is, they noticed that there are buyouts and furloughs, and that have left a diversity gap among the editorial staff? And are there any plans to address this moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so as soon as we get the green light to hire again, which will be in a couple months, the number one priority is to hire more Black journalists. We've done a decent job of diversifying with Hispanic journalists, but we'll continue to do that, and Asian, and diversity comes in a lot of different ways. So yeah, that's the number one focus. I think our CEO will be announcing some things today that will help support us in that effort. So yeah, it's top of mind.
That's great, thank you. We have a question on, are there any story angles you're just completely over and new ones given the new reality?
I don't think I'm over anything. I think
Right.
every story stands or falls on its own merits. So we could have 10 stories on dogs and say, oh my gosh, we're full up on dogs. But then somebody comes in with a fantastic pitch that we've never heard about dogs. Clearly, we're not doing stories on dogs, but you know what I mean? But if the opportunity to tell a great story is there, I don't think that we're shying away or leaning towards anything. Certainly the rotation is super heavy on COVID, on demonstrations, on equality, soon to be on hurricanes. But a good pitch is a good pitch.
Again, I guess it's about who you're talking to and does it fit the time you're pitching again. Yeah.
Right.
I know we had a question earlier about the video and we had a great answer. We have a follow-up to it, but I think you guys have the same thoughts on it. What about B-roll that you can edit was a question that we got. But I think from a video perspective, it's for you guys, it's still the same answer, I would assume. All right. If you don't use a release or pitch on air, do you use it on your website?
Totally depends, right? The website, we always say that on the digital side, 20% of the stories probably generate 80% of the interest. So if it's a story that's probably not going to work on broadcast, it's less likely maybe to air on digital, but then it might be just quirky enough that it would air on digital, It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, we definitely never copy paste press releases.
Yeah.
But, we do use them, especially more on our website. Like I think Kristen alluded to earlier, our website has ballooned. I think everybody's website has ballooned. It's just incredible the amount of traffic that the websites are generating. So it's this monster that we have to feed 24/7. It's not like TV where, we have our regular scheduled newscasts, except for spot news or whatever, but the website is always on. And we had to hire a couple of freelancers to work from home to feed the website overnight and on the weekends. Where before the weekends basically we went home. And now we even have to update on the weekends. So we never do, we redact, we rewrite it. And so it's always good to put there like a contact person, who to call in case because a lot of things go on the website that necessarily don't make it to air because there's so much more volume on the website.
If you take those two thoughts together, right, providing video and saying, would you edit video? It kind of implies that you'd already be furnishing a fully done story. I think if you're really in that business, looking on the advertorial side is probably a better play, right? That things that probably wouldn't pass the smell test for basic TV broadcast, but certainly could find a place, in the sales department kind of section that's identified as what it is. But I'm not a salesperson, so bad advice.
I would agree with we don't take press releases and put them on the paper. If it's interesting enough, if it's newsy enough, we'll report it ourselves.
Right.
Thank you guys. I'm sure that was very helpful for everybody. We have a question on what advice would you give to communicators developing a media resources page for their organization? And how do you feel about these pages, and what issues do you sometimes find with them? There might be some interesting things you may have seen.
I personally don't look at them, so I'm probably not the best one to answer.
I don't even know what that means, so I'm not going to try to answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Oops. We received a similar questions. When provided with data findings on a topic, are you only interested in Central Florida local data, or are you interested in statewide information?
I'm personally interested in statewide, especially since I also have a South Florida paper. But you know, we'll start with Central. But if we can widen it out statewide, we will do that.
Yeah, I would do the same. I mean, definitely local rules, but with the COVID, we keep doing stories about the whole state, and especially South Florida, which has been the hot spot. We've done a lot of stories from there. So yeah, definitely local always trumps national, but local and state, I would say it's pretty good, you know, to have both.
Statewide gives us context, and we
Right.
like context. So both.
Awesome. Thank you. We touched on this earlier. Do you prefer pictures over press releases? I'm assuming, you know, you guys end up changing and writing depending on how it fits your content as well. But if you wanted to add any thoughts on that, feel free to do that.
And I think they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree a little bit. I think a pitch is, you know, certainly a press release is A, B, and C, but there are nuances to certain stories that can't really be summed up with that kind of data. So if you have a relationship with a reporter or somebody, I think it's okay to call and go, hey, look, I've got this story. I really think there's something here. I've got this, this, and this. Interested? And sometimes a conversation is going to better serve what you're pitching than just, you know, because if you get the pitch wrong, it's not going to happen. But if you're secure enough in saying, I know I've got something, but I don't know exactly what it is, but here are the elements, and you've got a contact, I think it's a worthy conversation to have.
Yeah. All righty. We have a question on, are you interested in pitches about how certain businesses and organizations are adjusting their operations to reopen amid this pandemic? And what key elements do you care about on this topic of operational changes?
I mean, that's very interesting to me. You know, all kinds of reopenings. Everybody is struggling with how to do it. And so when we write about that, we see a lot of engagement on those stories. You know, in terms of the details, what safety precautions they're taking, what's different about the reopening than before that, you know, they were open. And you know, you just put yourself in a consumer's state of mind, and what questions would they ask, and supply that. That's a good place to start.
Yeah. I think people are very, very interested in how they're going to stay safe, because definitely the government doesn't care anymore, or they're not into it anymore. I shouldn't editorialize. So basically, it's going to be up to us to stay virus-free. And that's our responsibility as media, to tell people how to stay virus-free. And anything that has to do with safety, whether it's at a restaurant, at a hospital, at a sports arena, anything that has to do with safety, how are people going to be safe? That's going to be a story, no matter what, because it's up to us now to stay safe. You know, Julie just published that the record went up in the state again. So, you know, we keep getting infections. They're not going to go away. And last night, Harvard predicted another 100,000 deaths on top of the 100,000 we already have. So definitely, you know, it's going to be up to us individually and our audience to stay safe from the, you know, from the virus.
Yeah, you know, personally speaking, I work in the utility industry. It's key, whether it's the health industry or restaurants, like you said, it's really important to say how you are staying safe during this time, and share stories if it fits again with the outlet that you're reaching out to and what they're covering at that time. We have one last question, and if you guys have any other questions, we could maybe take one more after this. We're going to slowly start wrapping up. The question is, are you interested in information about certain industries that have kept the economy going during COVID-19, where other industries have failed us time again, like our dependence on tourism?
Yeah, I think again, people are looking for good news. What's a company that survived? What is a company that served and been able to keep their employees and employed and had their customers have some level of normalcy? I think those are good news stories while also potentially cautionary tales.
Yeah, I would agree.
Small industries, small businesses, small mom and pops, how they've been able to survive, success stories. It's giving people hope. And we have to give a lot of hope as well, because we've had so much negative news. We first had the COVID, then the whole racial tension in the country, which I never saw that coming either. So people are, they're a little bit stressed out. So you got to give them a little bit of a hope, a light at the end of the tunnel.
Beautiful way to, I was about to say beautiful way to wrap it up. We have one last question. Do you care to hear about local CEOs speaking about racism, and what elements are important about their response?
Let me guess, they're going to be against it. I think it's interesting because it seems like now is a time where every person wants to say how bad racism is. Of course it's bad, unless your CEO is going to tell me how his or her company is fighting it and making change and adding to the conversation. I think the message has to be meaningful. It can't just be a message.
Agreed. They have to back it up with actions. And so that I think that's what their employees will be looking at too, because I think I've seen cases where they've been called out by their employees. So, I think it's got to be concrete steps. Yeah, but that would be interesting still.
Yeah, and in our case, we're owned by Comcast, and we did a story. They announced $100 million to kind of like help this whole racial tension issue in the country. So we did a story about that. I mean, that's a considerable amount of money. In Julie's case, you're going to be answering, you're going to be hiring more minorities. So that would be news as well. There has to be some meat to the announcement. Like Kristen said, you're going to be against racism. Everyone is.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you guys so much. Well, I think these are all the questions we had. I think we had a great conversation with everybody. Thank you everyone on the line for asking the questions. Thank you, Julie, Roberto, and Kirsten, for all your wonderful insights. I think, like you said, the authenticity and just working together during this time is more important than ever before. Like I mentioned, this webinar is recorded and it's going to be available on our website. And I encourage you guys to check it out, share with your friends. I'm sure everyone would appreciate some advice during this time. And as a quick reminder, as Rich mentioned earlier, we have another webinar next Thursday on June 18 at 11 a.m. with Stacy Smith, APR Fellow PRSA, who's the Senior Counsel and Partner at Jackson and Wagner. And she'll present on the topic of communicating with internal audiences. As much as we're working externally, it's very important to get that trust and communication going with our teams. Thank you guys again so much for being here and sharing these great tips for everybody, and just stay safe and we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Melissa.
Everybody,
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.